Same. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Ms. Smith, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we got you.
Okay, can you see me?
No.
Okay,
Can you see us?
I can see you.
Okay.
Let's see. It may just take me just a moment to figure this out.
Okay. That's fine. It may be that your camera is turned off.
Okay. And so I am on a Macintosh, an Apple. So let's see. Do you know where it would be at, where I could turn the camera on?
Well, on my screen up at the very top, we've got like a microphone picture and a video camera picture, and that video turns your camera on and off.
Okay, so let's see. Yeah, it's saying camera is not working. So let's see.
Oops.
I'm going to do a Google search.
Okay.
Okay, I think you can see me now.
Yes, we got you.
Okay.
All right, I told the class that we just let you talk for a few minutes just about your career choice and why you chose that and whatever comes to mind. And then they've got a few questions, I hope, for yeah, those are just some ideas. They've got some questions if they decide to ask. If you want to give them a few minutes to do that, does that work?
That will work fine. And so what kind of grade levels is everyone in?
Most of these are 11th and 12th graders.
Okay, so looking at going to college or looking to see what they're going to do after graduation at this point.
Most of these are college bound.
Okay. Okay. And did anyone? I came and spoke last year. Was anyone in the classrooms when I was speaking then? Okay.
No.
So, okay. Good. Good, because this is the same thing I'm basically going to be talking about. So, and I'm going to be looking over here on my right-hand side, your, I think, left-hand side. I have some notes up here. So if you see me looking over there, that's what I'm looking at. So I went to Wilson 1st through 12th grade. And does anyone know Mrs. Delano? Used to be Mrs. Hayes. So that's my mother, and she's a teacher there. So, you know, I have had a great experience at Wilson. Loved going there. When I reached my senior year, I was looking at what schools to go to. At that time, I didn't know that I wanted to be an attorney. So I decided to go to South Alabama. At that point in time, I thought Mobile was a big city, and I wanted to live by the beach, and so that's where I went. When I went to college, I actually didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know that I wanted to be an attorney. I decided to major in finance at that time, and actually was thinking I wanted to be a professor. One thing, if anyone's thinking about being an attorney, one of the big things I recommend is majoring in something you enjoy doing at undergrad. It matters. It does not matter at all what major you have. You can major in art, music, philosophy, political science. Any of those can get you into law school. The most important thing is to make good grades while you're in college there. So while I was in college, I became involved in the student government there. And so I started seeing how people use statutes and government to apply law. And it really, really impressed me. And I started thinking that I wanted to go and become an attorney. And so I sat down and I talked to one of my professors, and I explained where I was coming from. For one thing, I actually wanted to be a professor. I wanted to be a finance professor. And he actually recommended that I go to law school because, one, I thought I might also want to be in private practice, do something of that nature. He also explained to me that with a law degree, you can actually teach if you would like to. That's something I have not done yet. I'm only 5 years out of law school, but it's something that I would like to do in the future, is actually teach classes either at a community college or at a university here up in Alaska. Let's see. One of the things I recommend, a lot of you will probably be going into college right after high school. You've been in school for 12 years. You're going to be in school for another 4 years before going on to any sort of professional degree. I highly recommend taking time off. I actually took a year off before I went to law school, and I think that's becoming quite the norm. One of the things I wish I had done is actually to travel more or volunteered more, just did some sort of job that I really enjoyed doing, or just traveling. Because once you get into law school, you're basically on a pathway where you're going to be going to school for 3 more years, and then you are going to be having to get a job right after law school. And so I think for most people, it would be best to take a year off, maybe even 2 years before going to law school. I have some colleagues that actually have taken 5 or 10 years off. They go to undergrad, they decide they don't like what they're doing in life, and they decide they want to be a lawyer. And so they then go back to law school and start basically a second career down the road. Let's see. Applying for law school. After undergrad, you actually have to do 2 things. One, you need to have good grades in college. So finding a major that you're passionate about, making those good grades, actually doing the study for it, that's probably the #1 concern. The next thing is you have to take a test which is called the LSAT. I cannot remember what that stands for now, but that's the test that you have to take. It's kind of like the SAT or the ACT. You can take it multiple times, you can take classes, but it's very important that you do well on the LSAT. And so then you begin applying to different law schools. One of my probably my best recommendations I think I can give you if anyone is deciding to go to become an attorney, is to look at places that are going to give you the most scholarship money, as long as it's still a decent law school, unless you want to go to what's called if you want to go into what's called big law, which is corporate law firms where you're working about 60 to 80 hours a week, maybe possibly even more, but you're also making a lot of money. But those are going to be in the larger cities. We don't have many corporate law firms up here in Alaska, and quite frankly, it wouldn't have mattered where I went to law school for the job that I have now. I ended up going to Wake Forest University. It's up in North Carolina, in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I actually chose that university. I'm a huge outdoors person. I wanted to be close to the mountains. It's close to the Appalachian Trail, close to mountain biking, close to rock climbing. So that's where I decided to go. Law school is totally different from the type of learning that you're receiving here in high school, and also the type of learning that you're going to be in college. They actually teach a different way of they teach a different way of thinking. One of the most scariest things that happen when you first go into law school is on the first day of class and throughout the rest of your time there, the teacher doesn't actually give you information. They just ask questions. And so instead of me as I'm speaking here today, if I was teaching a class with you, I would just be asking each and every one of you questions. So I just single a person out, and actually sometimes they make you stand up and recite whatever the answer was to it. And so that's a very nerve-wracking case. I personally had never been in that sort of teaching environment before, or learning environment. Very, very nerve-wracking at first. However, it does teach you to be able to answer questions on your toes, and that's a very important quality in being an attorney, especially if you're a court litigator. So I was in North Carolina at that time. I had moved up there. I had decided that I didn't want to stay. I'd always lived in the South, and I wanted to go visit somewhere different. And so about 2012, I ended up applying for internships up in Alaska. I found an internship with what's called the Public Defender's Office here in Palmer, Alaska. That was in 2011. And they offered to pay for me to fly up there, and my law school gave me a stipend to live up here for a summer, where I was able to actually get in-court experience. I was defending criminal litigants after they had been prosecuted. So I was doing trials. I was in court every day, talking to clients, meeting with clients. During that time, I fell in love with Alaska. You can't see my window here, but I'm looking out on a huge mountain range just right out my window. And so I was in Palmer, Alaska. I knew this is where I wanted to live, and so I decided I'm going to make it happen. And so I went back. I actually had to go back to law school. I had another year left. I then had to apply for the bar exam, which is at that point in time, it was state specific, meaning that I had to learn all the laws of the state of Alaska. In law school, you're taught very broad general laws that do not apply specifically to states. And so for the bar exam, you actually have to learn what's specific to your state. And so I flew up to Alaska, I guess it was in 2012, and took the exam. Didn't have a job up here at that point in time. Then I flew back to Alabama, sold all my belongings, packed up my Jeep and my dog, and just everything that I could pack in the car, and then took off on a road trip. And so it was a 5,000-mile drive up to Alaska. It took about 4 weeks, which I stopped in all sorts of places on the way up here. And one of the craziest, I'd never made a road trip like this. I'd always flown back and forth to Alaska. And once you get to Canada, you would think that you were almost to Alaska, because on a map it looks very close. But I think I still had another 4,000 miles once I got to I got to Canada to get up to Alaska. So coming up to Alaska, I didn't have a job, so I came here. I had a friend that I met the year before up here, so I was living with him. Had absolutely no money. Didn't know if I'd passed the bar exam, so I didn't even know if I could be an attorney up here. But I started talking with a few of my friends, a few of the contacts I made, and I found a job with a small firm in a small town. It's called Palmer, Alaska. It's actually the same job that I'm at now, and that was 5 years ago. Let's see. And so at that point in time, there was two partners here. One of them has now became a judge, and so she's now left. And then actually at the end of the year, my current boss will be retiring, and I'll be. I'm actually in the process of starting my own firm here. So and when I came up here, what I wanted to do was criminal law, and that basically, you can either have two types of criminal law. You can be on the prosecution side, which is the district attorneys, or you can be on the defense side, where you're defending people that have been accused of crimes. And that's, when I first came up here, that's what I planned to do. And people always used to ask me, how can you defend these people that have committed these crimes? And one of the things I explained to them is, well, first off, most of the time people did commit the crime, but in certain incidences, people are actually innocent. And so you want to make sure the state or the prosecutor is following, and the police are following all of your constitutional rights, that they haven't broken any of those constitutional rights when they arrest your client. And so that's really what you're looking for most of the time. After moving up here, I kind of got out of the practice of criminal law. I now practice what is called civil law. And civil law is basically everything except for criminal law. I do appear in court quite often, approximately 5 times a month. I probably do a trial maybe one time a month. But the rest of my time is spent meeting with clients, doing motion work, doing research. I practice primarily in business law, real estate, and family law. But I like to take different and new cases just because I get bored very, very easily. And so I don't like seeing the same types of cases over and over, because I like learning new things. And if I did the same thing day in and day out, honestly, it would just I would just get bored of it. So that's one of the great things about being an attorney, is that you're always able to learn different and new skills. You can always adapt. What I was doing when I first came here is quite different than what I'm doing today, and maybe quite different than what I'm doing 10 years down the road. Let's see. Most people expect attorneys appear in front of juries on a regular basis. That's actually really not the case. Unless you're a criminal law attorney, you're not going to be in front of juries. I have never been the best public speaker. I have always gotten nervous speaking in front of people. It's not one of my best qualities. However, I don't think that's what makes or breaks an attorney. I think when attention to detail, being able to relate to others, those are the best qualities I believe that you can have in an attorney. Most of my time, like as I was saying earlier, most of my time is not in front of, I'm not putting on a show, I'm not in front of a jury. I'm trying to convince one person, a judge, that my client it has the correct path. And also, you have to be able to get along with your clients, because that's where the majority of your time is spent, is actually talking in private to your clients, and also doing that motion work for your clients while in private. So by far, probably 90% of my time is spent not in the courtroom, and only about 10% of the, maybe 10% of the time is spent in the actual courtroom itself. The things I love about my job, there's really two things. And one is that I constantly get to learn new things. I get to learn how businesses operate. I get to learn how local governments work. I get to learn about what's going on in the legislature and why the legislature is creating these sort of statutes. Another thing you get to do is you get to learn, and this sounds kind of, I don't know, it sounds slightly bad, but you get to learn from other people's mistakes. Most people come to an attorney when they've already made some sort of mistake or they haven't thought something fully through. And so that's one of the things that you get to learn. You get to learn and say, hey, if I'm ever put in this situation, or my client's ever put in this situation in the future, this is what should occur instead of whatever that person has done. And then finally, the main reason I love being an attorney is that I'm able to help others. As I was just speaking of, people come to see when they're in times of need. Most people don't come to see an attorney when it's the best time of their life, and they usually only go somewhere or go see an attorney when something has went wrong. And so, a lot of times, you're able to give that guidance to push someone and give guidance to the person in the right direction. That's one of the reasons that attorneys are also called counselors or counselors at law. It's because that's what a lot of our stuff is doing. Sometimes I feel more of a social worker than an actual attorney, just basically giving the guidance for my clients. So, being an attorney is a stressful career, but I would not choose any other profession. Coming in to being an attorney, I did not know what all fully entailed. And there's quite a few people out there that do not enjoy being an attorney, so it's not for everyone. But I love what I do. I love where it's taking me. I love where it's going to take me in the future. And it's really brought me to new places. 10 years ago, or actually just probably 12 years ago, I was sitting in the same seats as all of you were. I could never imagined that I would be living in Alaska now and working as an attorney. So it's been a great ride. It's been a great career. I'm really enjoying it. And it's a great profession if it's what you want to do. So that's my basic speech for you today. So if it's okay with Ms. Smith, I will just open it up to questions, and feel free to ask me anything. Hopefully I can answer it for you.
Okay, hopefully we'll have crickets. Maybe they have some questions. Anybody have questions in front of you? Mr. Hayes, I have a question about how many cases do you have at one time?
I get asked that question quite a bit, and I'm not really sure. The best I could say would be maybe 20 active clients, but if I look at my contacts on my computer, we have over, I would say, about 2,000 or 3,000 clients in our system. So actively on an everyday basis, I'm probably dealing with about 20 or so different case files or 20 or so different clients on it. So if you go into if you want to be a criminal prosecutor or a public defender, you're going to be looking at a caseload of sometimes up to 200 or 300 cases at a time.
Were you able to work while you were getting your degree?
Not during law school. I chose not to. Some people do take jobs, and actually the universities offer jobs to law students. I wanted to focus just primarily on my studies at that time. I did work all throughout college, though. I worked about 30 hours a week while I was in college.
How has your job affected your lifestyle?
Will you say that one more time?
How has your job affected your lifestyle?
Well, let's see. I would actually say my lifestyle is quite much nicer than it was while I was in school. I work a lot less than how much I studied during law school. So I probably studied, I would say, about 60 hours a week. I work on average 40 hours a week now. So, but for example, 2 weeks ago, I had a major trial. And so I worked 12 hours on a Saturday, 10 hours on a Sunday. On that Monday, I worked another 10 hours. And so just in those few days, I'd spent what most people would spend in an entire work week. Good question, though.
Are you the first asker? Yes, I am. Is it challenging to pay back student loan debt on your average attorney salary?
It is a challenge, and so especially as starting out, it's very, very hard to pay back student loans. And so as my career is progressing, I'm hoping it's going to be a much easier endeavor to go into. One thing that people should think about, though, don't let student loans truly affect where you're going to go, because there's a thing called public student loan forgiveness, or sorry, it's something along the lines of that. But if you're a district attorney or a prosecutor, or if you work for any governmental agency, the government will end up paying back a portion of your student loans. You actually get on an income-based repayment plan, and you pay that for 10 years, and anything that's still outstanding at that time, you can actually have that forgiven. Because I'm in private practice, that does not apply to me, but that is something that can be done. So you can go into usually public service is going to be a lower paying job than private practice, and so that's to give people with high student loan debt the ability to continue to go to law school. Anyone else? Others? I know some other people have questions.
I think they're all related to the one.
No, I'm just the one asking you. These aren't all my questions. Why did you pick to go to Alaska? Like, okay, what are the difference between living here and the difference between living in Alaska? Like, what are the big differences that you like?
The mountains. So, like, and looking out in front of me, I have a 6,000-foot peak just outside my window here. And so the beauty and the huge land mass here in Alaska. People don't realize that Alaska is a third of the size of the United States. It has more coastline than the continental 48 states. So, for example, I had a trial in Nome, Alaska. And that's where I think Sarah Palin says that she can see Russia from her doorstep, but they're talking about Nome. And just to get to Nome for my trial, it was a 3-hour flight to get there. Outside of the major cities, which is Palmer, Fairbanks, and Anchorage, there's no road system. And so the only way to get around is either the only way to get around is by plane.
So you don't have a car?
I do have a car.
Yeah.
I live in Palmer, and so I'm on the road system. Okay. And so, but the majority of the land in Alaska, I would say maybe 10% of the towns in Alaska have roads to them. The rest of it's what we call out in the bush. So when you think of Eskimos and things of that nature, those towns still have no roads to them. So, and I should say, even in those towns, they still have cars there. You just cannot get from where I live to that location.
Mm-hmm. Do you allow high school students to shadow you?
I've never had any high school students shadow me, but if you come up to Alaska, get in touch with me, and you can shadow me for a day. So.
Which parts of your job do you find most exciting, and which parts do you find the most boring?
Trial preparation is probably the most boring portion, because I'm spending countless hours, sometimes weeks, going over documents. and people's depositions and prior testimony. By far the most exciting is going to trial. So the most boring part about having my job is preparing for trial, but the most exciting portion is actually going to trial. The most stressful time, I would say, is after trial ends and the judge or the jury has not issued a decision yet. So you don't know which way it's going to turn. And so and sometimes it takes, if a judge is going to be issuing the decision, it sometimes takes up to 6 months to get that decision. And so you're waiting for the judge to decide for or against your client. And so that is definitely probably the most stressful portion of it.
What time is it there?
It's 10:55.
In the morning?
AM.
In the morning, yes. So
We almost out of school.
yeah, and other questions I sometimes get, is it either always daylight or always dark? And neither one of those are, well, the fully daylight is actually true in the summertime. We get 24 hours of daylight. In the wintertime, so coming in about December 21st is the winter solstice. They only have about 4 or 5 hours of daylight. So during that time, I go to work and it's dark, and then I go home and it's still dark outside. And that takes some getting used to. I actually get outside and go skiing and biking in the dark. Actually, we have these trail systems that are fully lighted. So it actually feels like you're doing it in the daylight, but there's all these ski trails that you can do at night when you get off work. So another thing that people sometimes think is that it's always cold here. In the summers, it gets up to roughly about 80 degrees, and my mom and my dad still come up every summer, and they actually complain about the heat up here because 80 degrees up here feels like 100 degrees in Florence. And so it's a big difference. In the cold here, even though it'll get to, I guess probably the coldest I've been in is a -40. But if it's 0 degrees or 20 degrees, it feels about like 30 degrees or 40 degrees in Alabama. So I think it's due to the humidity. I'm not really sure, but it's a huge, the actual temperature difference has not bothered me one bit.
Got any more questions?
Yeah, and you can ask random questions too. So anything about Alaska, school?
There's one about school in here. What courses in high school best prepared you for your college experience?
English.
So,
he
said English.
Anything to do with writing. So that's really what prepared me the most, because I was not expecting to have to write nearly as much as I did in undergrad. And then, of course, that greatly expanded once I got to law school as well. So actually, I wish I could still remember all the English that I did learn while I was in high school for my job now. So I've actually thought about taking a new course to improve my writing.
How much of psychology do you use in your career? Like, does psychology have a lot to do with it?
It is involved quite a bit. I'm actually involved in a case right now where I am trying to obtain some psychological exams that were going on to prove or disprove an issue in one of my cases. So when you're talking about psychology, I deal with psychologists, especially in family law cases, on a very frequent basis. So just yesterday, I was on a phone call with a psychologist.
And I guess this can be the last question, but what's the best advice you give to someone interested in this field?
Interested in the field?
Yeah, like the best advice you can
Maybe going to law school is it's a very expensive investment, and it's a life-changing event. And so I think one of the best things that someone could do is actually working or volunteering or interning in a law practice before even going to law school. A lot of the things I believe being an attorney was like before going to law school is not the case as it is actually is. Some of them I like more than what I thought it would be. Some of the things less. And so, and even in law school, I don't think law school teaches you how to be a lawyer. They teach you how to think. But like when I first got to Alaska, I didn't know how to file a motion. I didn't even know when to stand up or sit down in court. That's not the sort of thing that they actually teach you in law school. And so I think going and interning with a law practice before deciding for basically a lifetime commitment is a very important thing to do. And be passionate about it. There's so many people in that are attorneys that are not passionate about the work, and it's something that I am very, very passionate about. But I can't imagine being in a job and basically stuck in a job for the rest of your life that you do not enjoy. You're going to spend more of your time at your job than you are going to be anywhere else. So that's, for the most part, you're going to be at your job more than you're at home. And so whatever you decide to do, make sure it's something that you love.
All right, I think we are almost out of time for our class, Mr. Hayes. Y'all want to wave bye? Someone, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We enjoyed it.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Let's see. Bye-bye.
Bye.